You know, I'm in charge of bad food around here, but I have to say, coming up with a bad chocolate caramel cake.
That's a tall order.
Yeah, that's a tall order.
And yet you did it.
And yet I've done it. Now, the problem is the caramel is set too hard.
Right.
And the cake is too tender. So when you try to spread it.
Yeah, you're going to tear up that cake. The caramel doesn't spread.
So we need the right cake and the right caramel. We have neither, so let's throw this away and get started for real.
So let's start off with our first component, our chocolate cake. So this is 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and I do want to sift this together with 3/4 cup of cocoa. You can use natural cocoa or Dutch processed cocoa for a little bit of a deeper flavor. So I'll just sift this quickly. Now to this I'll add 1.5 cups of sugar, just plain old granulated sugar. I have 1¼ teaspoon of baking soda, as well as 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder. So we're going to get a lift from both the soda and the powder, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. So we'll whisk this together. So for our liquid ingredients, we're going to start with buttermilk, and it's an acidic ingredient that's going to react with the baking soda and give a little lift. So this is 3/4 cup of buttermilk. We'll also add 1/2 cup of water. That's not any special kind of water, just water. Also have 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, and this is key. We found that when we used melted butter or even softened butter in the chocolate cake, it muted its flavor, but the vegetable oil really allows that chocolate flavor to come through. And we have 2 large eggs and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Vanilla is one of those chocolate flavor enhancers. So I'll break up these egg yolks and whisk this together. Now this is going to go right into our dry mix, and I'll whisk this together until I don't see any dry patches of the flour and the cocoa together. So now we get 2 large spoons and start eating this. Now we do have to bake these. I have 2 9-inch round cake pans. Gone ahead and greased them, added a layer of parchment paper, and greased the paper as well. All right, so let me go ahead and spread this out.
I could try it.
There you go. So these are going to bake in a 325-degree oven, and we're looking for them to be done so that a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. So that's going to take between 22, maybe up to 28 minutes. Smells great, and I think these are done. We want to check the center with a toothpick. So you can see that's nice and clean, no crumbs there. These cakes are definitely done. We're going to let them firm up, cool down for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to turn them out onto a wire rack and then re-invert them so that they're pretty side up. All right, Chris, so our cakes have cooled, so now we want to start working on our caramel filling. This is 3/4 cup of sugar, just plain granulated sugar, along with 1/4 cup of water, and this is 1/4 cup of corn syrup. It's just going to help prevent crystallization when we're making our caramel. All right, so just combine this till the granulated sugar is sort of mixed in with the water. We don't need to let it completely dissolve because that's what the heat is going to do. So now we'll go ahead and bring this up to the boil over medium-high heat. We're going to leave it alone. We don't want to start stirring it because that could start the crystallization around the sides and the edges of the pan. So we're going to leave it alone until it just starts to turn a slight amber color, and that's going to be our cue to slow down cooking. All right, Chris, you can see that the caramel, most of it is colored in a nice light amber color, so now we want to slow down cooking. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and swirl the pan to make sure that it's all coloring evenly, and we want to get it pretty darn dark.
Is that a culinary term, Bridget?
It is a culinary term. The temperature that I'm going to look for is around 375. No more than that because it won't be spreadable later on. So just about 2 to 5 minutes should do it. Again, we're doing it over a lower heat so it won't get away from us. Now when you're taking the temperature of caramel, it's a good idea to kind of tilt the pan, and you want to swirl it into the side. And if I do this, I can actually see that it's right about 375. And we're just starting to see some smoke in there. I'm going to take this off heat, and now we want to stop the cooking at this point. This is a cup of heavy cream, and I'll just add a little bit of it in there and start stirring it. Now it's going to bubble vigorously, so you don't want to add too much all at once. And now I can add the rest. I know.
That's the best color in the world, isn't it?
Isn't that gorgeous?
Yeah.
So now 8 tablespoons of butter. The butter is key, not only for flavor, but it's going to keep this nice and spreadable. All right, we have a teaspoon of vanilla extract and quite a bit of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of just regular salt because we want that salted caramel flavor. So I'll swirl this a little bit. So now this is going to go back on the burner, this time on medium heat. So this mixture, we want to keep an eye on it. I want a temperature between 240, 245 so it stays spreadable. That's only going to take maybe 3 or 5 minutes. We are right above 240 here, so it's time to take this right out of the pan. Now I'm going to move it to a 9-inch square pan that I've gone ahead and greased with a little bit of vegetable oil spray. And this is going to help the caramel cool down very quickly. So we're going to let this cool down, and it's going to take at least a half an hour, and then we can move on to the next step.
Okay.
All right, Chris, this is the last component of our cake, our chocolate frosting. This is 16 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and it's softened nicely, so I'm going to put this right into the food processor. It's always good when it starts with a little bit of butter. Now, I am adding some confectioner's sugar. This is 3/4 cup of confectioner's sugar. I have here a half a cup of cocoa, just regular unsweetened cocoa. And we thought that adding cocoa to this might make it feel a little gritty. But what happens is that the butter coats the cocoa, so we really don't have that gritty feel. And I've got a pinch of salt, just a pinch, right in there. And now we'll go ahead and turn this on. I want to process this for about 30 seconds. I may need to scrape down the sides a few times. All right, let's take a look in here, Chris. Oh, it's almost like chocolate fudge. We could pretty much be done with this right now, and I'd be really happy.
That's what I was thinking.
But as it is, it just doesn't have the right consistency to spread all over our cake. So, I'm going to add a couple more ingredients. I have a half a cup of corn syrup. Now, this is our other sweetener, but it doesn't have any of that grit of that confectioner sugar. So we'll go ahead and add this in along with 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now this is only going to need about 15 seconds more in the food processor at this point. All right. Now you can see it's lightened up just a little bit, and the consistency, it's definitely more spreadable. So we have a little bit of cocoa in here, but we definitely want to add chocolate. This is 6 ounces of bittersweet chocolate. We've melted and let it cool. But now, after the chocolate goes in, now I am going to pulse the chocolate into this mixture. It's going to take about 15 seconds. All right.
Just a little soupçon.
Yes. It's got that real silky feel too, and deep chocolate flavor, almost like a ganache. But unlike a ganache, we could go ahead and use this right away. So this is the last component. We've got our frosting, we've baked our cakes, and we've got our caramel filling. So we're just going to get them all out here, and we can assemble our cake.
And I have my snack.
Aren't you happy?
I am happy.
All right, Chris, let's put the cake together. Now I've gone ahead and split one of the cake layers horizontally in half, and you can see what a beautiful crumb this is. So let's move on over here to our other cake layer. Now, in order to split this into 2 even halves, I like to take a serrated knife and just kind of make a first pass all the way around. And it's great if you have one of these rotating cake stands. It makes life easier.
Especially with a very heavy bottom.
Yes. What? Oh, yes, the cake stand. Now, once you've gone around the cake once and kind of traced, now you can go ahead
And be bold.
and be bold and start working that knife all the way through. There we go. So now I'm going to take this entire cake over here, and this is going to be our top layer. So I'll just scoot this right off, and there we go. Now it's time for our caramel filling. Now we've let it cool here in this pan. You can feel it right on the bottom. It's nice and cool, room temperature. All right, so I need to divide this into 3 equal parts here because we're going to put the caramel frosting on these 3 layers. So I'll take a rubber spatula and just kind of eyeball a third. So I'll scoop up a third of this caramel.
That is one of the most wonderful things we've ever created here.
You like that?
Yes, I think that, forget the cake, forget the frosting, just...
So now I'm going to take an offset
boy.
spatula, and you can see how shiny that caramel is. And it's still very spreadable. So I'm just going to work this out to the edges, and I want to leave about a 1/2 inch border right around the edge. All right, so next batch of caramel, we'll scoop it out. I know you like this part.
I love this part.
And right there. It's almost like toffee. It's got that really deep flavor. last scoop, and I believe there may be just a few traces of caramel left in the pan, Chris. How about that? There you go.
Yes, I'm putting my finger in the pan. People are going to write in.
All right, so that looks great. So now we can assemble the cake. Now we're going to assemble it right on our cake stand. So I'll go ahead and line this with a few pieces of parchment paper. It's just going to make cleanup a little easier later on when I go to frost this. So to transfer these are pretty heavy, especially with the caramel on it. You can use the bottom of a tart pan to slide right under these and put on your cake stand, or a cardboard round. I actually like the thinner layer of the tart pan. All right, and we'll place this right on here. Thank you, Chris. Now, next caramel layer, right here.
You know, when you bake with young kids,
Yeah?
you know, they think they're helping.
Yes.
That's kind of like what I'm doing here.
Is that what you're doing?
You kind of make me feel good about helping you. That's like...
Oh, you're also here for moral support.
No, I'm here to have a piece of cake.
That's what I figured. And then last but not least, of course, our chocolate cake top without the caramel filling. All right, Chris, it's time to put our frosting all over the cake. All right, I'm going to start at the top, so let me get a blob right on top. There we go. And now I'll start working it out to the sides and let it overhang just a bit. I mean, look at the texture of that frosting.
I am almost hypnotized.
I like it when you're hypnotized.
I know
It means
you
you're
do, 'cause I don't
quiet.
talk.
So now that the chocolate is covering the top, I'll go ahead and start loading the sides. And I like to put the frosting on the back side of an offset spatula to do that. So that way I can kind of press it in between the layers, just like that, and work my way around. You also want to make sure that you get to the very bottom of the cake. This frosting is so easy to use, it really is. And it's always better to add too little frosting at first because you can always add more once you go around the cake once. All right, Chris, I'm going to start to clean this up. So first thing I want to do is work my spatula around and try to get a nice smooth top. It doesn't have to be too smooth because I am going to add a little bit of a decoration there. And then go around the sides and clean that up until it's nice and smooth. Now, see this ridge here where the top and the sides meet? I just want to knock that down a little bit. So I'm going from the outside in. You can see it just brings it back toward the center. And that looks pretty darn good. Now I'm going to work on it a little bit more, but I do want to show you our fabulous zigzag technique. Now you just take a regular bread knife and you start at one end and you start to run it back and forward.
Ooh, that's cool.
Isn't that pretty? It's almost like a herringbone. Now I am going to touch this up a little bit more, but we want to let this sit for about an hour. That frosting is going to firm up just a little bit and it'll be beautiful and ready to eat. It's time. We're going to eat the cake, as I promised. So now I'll just kind of pull away the messy parchment that no one will ever know we used to frost this cake. And now we have one last garnish, and that is sea salt. This is sea salt flakes. I'm just going to add a little bit in the center, somewhere between a quarter teaspoon and half a teaspoon. No more or it gets ridiculously salty. Let's slice this.
See, you have to love Bridget because when she cuts a piece of cake for herself, you don't take a little tiny piece. You take a real piece.
Oh, heck no.
Yeah.
I mean, you can actually taste each component, too. It's not like the caramel's lost or the
I think we should just fade to black because I don't really have anything to say. This is so good. So a great chocolate caramel cake, even the name's great. Started with a basic dump and stir cake that used buttermilk and cocoa powder. Baked that off in 9-inch rounds and then cut them in half after they were cool. We made a caramel syrup that also contains some corn syrup. Up to 375, added the butter, cream, and vanilla, and then brought that back to 240, let that cool off in a separate pan. And then we made a food processor chocolate frosting, assembled the cake, you did a lovely job, and a little bit of coarse sea salt in the middle on top to finish. So there you have it, from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, the world's best chocolate cake, chocolate caramel cake.